Right, Parag Khanna, the US has said they want verifiable denuclearization. Do you think that is something North Korea would agree to? Verifiable, of course, means allowing inspectors to go in there and actually seeing for themselves.
For just a bit of context, let's go back. One of the additional factors that has brought North Korea to the table is not just the sanctions, it's not just the election of President Moon in South Korea and his willingness to go back to this sunshine policy, but it's of course the fact that the major event of last year really was North Korea's own testing of its nuclear weapon. And in that sense, it felt that it has a bit more leverage in these discussions because it is now a verified, if you will, nuclear power. Now, to move from that point to immediately getting them to denuclearize is going to be a very, very difficult step. This is their claim, in a way, to buttress their legitimacy as a major power in the region. So giving it up is going to be very, very tough. They have, of course, very recently taken a few steps, such as blowing up certain tunnels where nuclear test activity took place. We can see some initial steps. For example, they could enter conversations to join the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. This is the kind of move that a country might do after it has felt the security of having its own nuclear arsenal that it no longer needs to test. So CTBT is one important step. We'll have to, again, define it. Are they going to dismantle warheads? Are they going to give up fissile material? What is the South Korean position on just how much the North has to give up to constitute what is for them sufficient to enter into more dialogue with the North around reunification? So the U.S. perspective on this is extremely important, but they may step by step be convinced to soften the timeline on total denuclearization so that other things that North Korea really does want, such as lifting of sanctions and so forth, can move forward. And I expect there to be a lot of movement of these micro steps and adjustments over the coming months. So definitions will have to be made, but definitions are also going to be adjusted.
Right, and this offer to provide Kim Jongun unprecedented security guarantees, how do you see that? So the U.S. is promising that they're not going to do anything to hurt his position there in North Korea?
Correct. In this case, the definition of security guarantee is that it promises not to attack the country during its process of denuclearization, should they agree to that step. It also means that as the opening between North and South Korea moves forward and there's talk of eventual reunification, that the United States, even if it does acquiesce to the demands to move its nearly 30,000 troops off of South Korea gradually, that is still going to be a security guarantor of the Korean Peninsula, whether that means both North and South Korea or some version of a gradually reunifying Korean Peninsula. So the United States is offering that it will protect the security of the Korean Peninsula, and that, of course, is code for meaning that it's going to make sure that China doesn't take advantage of the situation in terms of overly aggressively pushing its leverage with North Korea.
All right, Bhairavi, and what does this now mean for India, whichever way these talks go, the fact that Trump and Kim Jong-un are meeting, what does it mean for us?
Right, Gargi, the Indians have been watching this very, very closely. And, we remember that VK Singh, flew down to North Korea in that surprise visit. And, we are the second largest, exporter, trade partner rather, to North Korea after China. So we've always had, engagement and relationship with North Korea. We also have always had, an embassy there, and this, of course, even though the US weren't very happy with this. In fact, the foreign minister went on record to say that, look, the US needs some friendly nations to engage with North Korea. So keeping that in mind, we are going to keep our relationship intact with North Korea. Now, just to talk a little bit more about what this means to people like, to countries like Japan, as Parag was saying, and Parag Khanna was pointing out that, they have many worries as well, Parag. The fact that they actually, Shinzo Abe actually flew down to the White House just days before the meeting of Kim Jong-un and President Trump is the fact that they worry what's going to happen to the medium range or the short term missiles. Are they going to be a country that's going to be deprived of their dealing power with North Korea, because Donald Trump will just certainly only keep the American interests in mind? Parag.
That's a very, very good point. And again, Japan, as with other surrounding countries, especially China as well, will again assume a greater role as things move forward. As the Northeast Asian countries gradually learn to deal directly with each other without the U.S. as the driving intermediary. The U.S. is setting certain conditions. It's stating what it will and will not accept. It's stating under what conditions it will gradually withdraw its own forces. All of that sets the stage for China, Japan, and South Korea with North Korea to more actively negotiate with each other. And Japan is going to be critical because if there is a peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula, we're talking then about a Korean economy, a population of 80 million people that will experience obviously a lot of industrial potential through the resources that North Korea represents. There will be an economic boom in many ways for the South Korean economy, even despite the costs. Remember that unlike East Germany, North Korea is very rich in natural resources that can be exploited and harnessed. So there will be a momentum to this expanded Korean state if there is peaceful reunification. But that will mean that Japan will have this proverbial fear of missing out, right? Because the growth story is going to shift to the Korean Peninsula, and it's going to want to have influence there. And I think my prediction is that Japan will have to sort of throw its hat in the ring and to find its own ways to have leverage on the Korean Peninsula through its own investment activities and trade activities. It will have to normalize. It may have to it will have to swallow its pride more and issue some of those apologies more formally to China and to Korea for wartime atrocities, for example, because this has been a sticking issue. So while as this moves forward, Japan, of course, is looking at this very carefully, and I do think that they are going to have to participate much more actively in direct diplomacy with these neighbors than they have been in the past. As you mentioned, in the past, President Abe makes his trips to Washington to determine Japan's Asia policy. That's just not going to be the case anymore. Japan is going to have to learn to accept its Asian role and deal directly with its Asian neighbors, and that's going to be difficult for Japan to do, but it will have to do it.